Hey, what's up all my Nexus family? It's your host, Dr. Daniel Kimbley. You're tuned into another episode of the Nexus Podcast. And this week on the podcast, here is what I want to talk about. I had a long weekend in the airport. Some of you have heard the story. I haven't shared it with very many people because I try to keep it positive when you're around me. But it's suffice it to say that I had a long, challenging weekend in the airport. And I ended up not even making it to my destination. And one of the things that I noticed when I was on the plane, when I was sitting in the airport, literally had to sleep in the airport overnight, there were some things that I noticed. And one of the things that I noticed is a lot of people like overly stressing out. And what I mean by this is we were stuck on a plane for multiple hours, like on a tarmac, not able to get gas, not able to get off, and then we're letting anybody off the plane. And a lot of people started to freak out. Like you could just sense this like frustration and this anxiety start to creep in, and people really getting upset. And the interesting part about it is like we had no control over the situation. It's like we had to do whatever the airline told us to do in that. But so many people, like not only did they not have control of the situation, but they didn't have the control of their emotions as well. And so Dr. Taylor and I, we were on the plane together and we had a quick conversation about like, man, isn't it so great that we get to get chiropractic care? As a result, we're experiencing less stress. We're experiencing less of that anxiety because we know that when we're getting adjusted, we know that when you're getting adjusted, we know that your family members are getting adjusted, we're literally affecting the frontal cortex of the brain, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for you being able to stay in the moment and stay present and not get into this anxious place. We know that anxiety is nothing more than a fear of the future. And so people not having this knowing of what's going to happen next or when we're going to be able to get off the plane, a lot of people slip into anxiety. That's not a result of accident. It's a result, it's a symptom of a weak front part of the brain to turn off the temporal lobes to say, hey, everything is going to be okay. The front part of the brain is the rational part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that just thinks things through logically. And so when we see these, like there were quite a few people on the plane who are just absolutely freaking out. Dr. Taylor and I are in this place of like peace and calm and like, yeah, it wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable by any means, but we weren't to this place of anxiety of other people, which brings me into the important point and the part of this podcast that I think is going to be the most important for you. And the question came to me as I'm watching these people kind of freak out on the airplane, and there were lots of people sitting in front of me, the woman sitting next to me. The woman sitting next to me literally could not sit still. Like every 30 seconds she was moving and flinching and twitching. And then she started, and I saw other people do this as well, as they started wanting to pop their neck. And I had this thought that I haven't shared with you on the podcast before, but I've shared with individual clients inside of our office before, is this idea or this question of like, why does someone in times of stress feel like they want to pop their neck? And it's a great question because what I know is that if you are manually popping your neck on your own to get some form of relief from it, yes, it feels good in the moment, but my question for you is, how do you know what joints of your spine you're moving? Because the reality is what we know about the brain is that movement of the joints of the spine has a very specific stimulus on the brain. And specifically, what I mean by that is like we know the people that we take care of inside of our office is that if we adjust you a lot on the left side of your body, that's going to affect the right frontal cortex of your brain. And vice versa, if we adjust you a lot on the right side of your body, that's going to affect the left frontal cortex of your brain. So why does this matter? It matters because when I see people sitting on a plane freaking out, anxiety starting to creep in, etc., then we see this tendency to want to pop our necks or pop our backs. I see people twisting and doing all this stuff. And I always tell clients inside of our office, like, you got to stop doing that. Like, it's not good for you to pop your own neck. I don't pop my own neck. I don't pop my own back. Why? Because I understand that there's a very specific stimulus that must go into my spine in order to affect my brain in a certain way. And if I don't know what joints are moving or not moving, then how can I be sure that I'm even giving myself a positive benefit in the first place? Now, here's where the question comes in, is people say, well, Dr. Daniel, that's cool, but the reality is like it feels good when I do it. And so I got to keep doing it because it feels good. So why is that the case? The reason that that's the case is because you have to remember something very specific about our brain and our body and the way it was designed by God. And that is this, is that we have two branches of our nervous system. We have a fight or flight branch of the nervous system, which is our stress branch of the nervous system. And we have our rest and our digest and our healing branch of the nervous system. We cannot be in both at the same time. So think about it this way, is that If we were cavemen and women and a bear or lion comes to attack us in the woods, we need to be able to do one thing and one thing only. It's either fight and kill the bear, or we need to run away from it. And as soon as we feel safe from the threat of that bear, we either kill it and then we feel safe because there's no threat anymore, or we run away from it and we don't see the bear anymore. Our body comes back down into this baseline of rest and digest on this side, where we're back in a healing state, we're more relaxed. Here's the problem though, is that we don't have bears that come and attack us anymore in the world. Like, sure, people have had attackers. I'm not discrediting that, but for the most part, our stresses are the stresses of bosses and the stresses of spouses and the stresses of kids and the stresses of getting kids from soccer practice to football practice, and this kid needs to be here and this kid needs to be to cheer, and then I gotta make sure my kiddos are studying at the end of the night, and all the while we're trying to make sure we're having fun on the weekends, and there's all this stuff that just stacks up, and it's stress. Fight or flight is key. What most people miss about fight or flight is that your brain is designed to release hormones to tell your body to get up and fight or run away. But the reality is that today in our world, in our time of stress, we never fight or run away. And if we never fight or run away, the brain gets confused because it says, hey, I'm telling this whole system, I'm telling the whole body to release stress hormones to literally get you up and to fight something and run away from it, and you're not doing it. And so since you're not doing it, I'm going to go into this protective state and I'm going to keep you there until I feel like it's safe to come out. But the problem is we never come out because we go work out for 1 hour a day, and for the other 16 hours a day, we put ourselves under massive stress, we put pressure on ourselves, we experience emotional stress, we experience stress from the world and the pollution outside, and as a result, like, our bodies never snap back into this healing state because they're stuck in a fight or flight because we never moved. Remember, fighting and running away are key. So what does this have to do with someone wanting to pop their own neck? And this is you. I'm going to encourage you to stop doing it, because what it has to do with someone wanting to pop their own neck is everything, and it's this. It's that when we have this tendency to want to pop our own neck, it is our way of our brain telling our body to try to get movement into the joints of the spine, because movement is key to remove the stress response. Movement is key to turning off the stress response. Now, exercise is great. Hear me when I say this loud and clear. Exercise is great, but exercising for 1 hour a day is not going to remove the stress response that your body has. The reality is that every time we look at a computer screen, every time we look at the blue light on a cell phone, every time we're inundated by fluorescent lights, every time that we breathe pollution from the air, every time that we eat bad food, all these are stresses on the system. The other stresses would be things like accidents and slips and falls and things like that. But even more importantly than those stresses are the stresses that we cause by our own thoughts. Our brain is the only brain of any species that can trigger a stress response on its own without having a threat in front of us. So many people that we work with inside of our office have these recurring thoughts of stress and fear and anxiety and worry. And the reality is that we never fight or run away from those. And so the brain is literally telling you, hey, I want movement into the joints of the spine. Get the joints of the spine moving. So this is why people have this tendency to want to pop their neck and back. But the reality is that if you're not in a place to be able to understand exactly how those joints of your spine are affecting your brain, and what joints of the spine are moving properly and not moving properly, and what joints of the spine need to be stimulated, and whether the cerebellum needs to be stimulated or the frontal cortex needs to be stimulated or somewhere in between, like, you're going to completely miss the boat. And this is why I see people all the time who we take care of who literally go from like, dude, I used to want to pop my neck every single day at work. I would do it like 100 times a day. I don't even think about it anymore. Why don't they think about it anymore? Because of the way that we adjust the spine to wake up the brain. And the brain says, there's no threat. Remember, movement is key. Getting the joints of the spine moving properly is key. When we get the joints of the spine moving well and moving properly, it wakes up the brain, and the brain says, we don't need to be in a fight or flight state. We can go back into this rest and digest state. And the most interesting part about it is that the fight or flight state actually turns off the frontal cortex of the brain. Every adjustment that we do with you is designed to not only stimulate and strengthen and raise up the front part of the brain, but it's also designed to turn off the stress response. So you can either be stuck in 1 or 2 cycles. You can be stuck in the fear, stress, anxiety, worry, fear, stress, anxiety, worry cycle, or when we turn that off, your body goes back into healing. You start to get more rational, conscious thought. You start to have less anxiety. You start to feel more optimistic and positive, because we know the frontal cortex is responsible for hope and faith and optimism and positivity and connection to God and spirituality and connection to other people and all the things that matter inside of your life. And so my question for you is this, is that how long are you going to go thinking that you popping your own neck is going to fix your problems? How long are you going to go thinking that you being able to pop your own low back is going to fix your problems. You get this temporary relief, but you do it hundreds of times a day and you don't even know what you're moving and what you're not moving and how that's having an effect on the brain. And I didn't even get into the conversation of how what actually matters is not the popping, but the speed of the adjustment, the speed of the movement of the joints of the spine. The pop or crack doesn't matter. The pop or crack doesn't mean anything at all. We don't do popping and cracking inside our office because we understand there's a very specific science and a very specific frequency which fires from the brain to the body, which is the beta somatomotor rhythm, and the body to the brain. And when we address that specific frequency and that specific rhythm, we start to snap the body out of a stress state back into this rest and digest state. So my question for you is this, is where in your life do you feel like you are doing yourself good by trying to self-adjust? I hear people all the time, oh, I'm so glad I've never needed a chiropractor. Those people don't understand what it is that chiropractors actually do because we have very, very, very little to do with pain. Yes, we can get people out of pain. We do it all the time. It's great. It's not what I get excited about. What we get excited about at Nexus Family Chiropractic here inside of our office is one thing and one thing only. It's people experiencing better posture, which leads to more presence, which leads to more productivity, which leads to more profit. Yes, when we adjust the brain, the front part of the brain is the part of the brain that tells your body to be in this posture, protective fight or flight posture, or an upright rest and digest healing posture. Your brain tells your body your posture. Once your brain is strong and you have good posture, you will by default have more presence. You will be able to be in the moment. You will be able to not freak out. This is exactly what I talked about when I talked about Dr. Taylor and I being on the airport this weekend and being stuck in this airplane. It's like we were the only people on the plane not freaking out. Why? Because we have chiropractic care as a part of our lives and we understand how neurophysiologically it is possible that we would experience less stress. We would be able to adapt to that same stress that some people freak out about better because our brains are well adjusted, because our spines are moving well, because our bodies are perfectly in alignment, and we understand this at a deep, deep level. That presence leads to more productivity. One of the coolest parts about all this, in light of all this stress, I just continued working. Literally working on my book, working on some things that I have coming. I got more done while most people were spending time complaining. And then lastly, that productivity leads to profit is yes, making more money. We help entrepreneurs make more money all the time because they can make better decisions, because they can deal with their teams better, because they can make moves more quickly. But really what we care about inside of our office is profit. Profiting from life experience. Being able to enjoy full out. We could have hated our experience and been miserable and still been upset and frustrated that we never made it to our final destination. We literally had to turn around and come back home. But guess what? We didn't. We enjoyed the moment. We enjoyed Oklahoma City. We had a blast doing it and we got to explore. And this is what we hope for all of our families and all the people that we take care of and ultimately the entire community that we live in is that people live a more prosperous, a more present, and more productivity and more profitable life in all aspects. My friends, that is all I have for you on this episode. If you got some value out of it, do me a couple of things. Is one, leave a rating, two, leave a review. I would also love it if you would check out this on YouTube as we're trying to break into that space. So if you like to see video and you want to see me talk, that's a perfect place to do that as well. And you know, as always, we'll come at you again next week. Peace.